why wouldn't that grocery store want to carry me?
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge comes up where competition is really fierce, right? Grocery coffee sections are crowded with both legacy brands and newer specialty roasters.
Mm-hmm.
And wholesale buyers just aren't looking to switch up their coffee assortment that often. And so I think what one of the challenges here is that brands are really optimistic about how easy it is, or that
Mm-hmm.
my product is really great. Why wouldn't that store want it?
Right.
Without realizing that if you've got that thinking, so does every other roaster in the neighborhood.
Hey friends, it's Lee Safar here with some exciting news. The introduction to regenerative coffee farming workshops are now available on demand in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. These workshops are designed to give you actionable insights into the future of coffee farming through regenerative agriculture. Whether you're a coffee producer, roaster, cafe owner, or just passionate about coffee sustainability. For coffee producers, the workshop is available for just $10, and for everyone else, it's $20. A small price to pay for knowledge that could transform your understanding of what it's going to take to grow coffee from now on. Led by our incredible professors Angela Barrero, Murilo Bettarello, Felipe Croce, Carlos Ordóñez, and João Araújo, the workshop is packed with practical knowledge and strategies to help coffee farmers and the entire coffee industry adapt to the challenges of climate change, rising costs, and market demands. If you're a business owner, this workshop is a great and affordable way to inform your employees about the challenges ahead while also supporting Map It Forward. This is also a great workshop to share with or gift to your coffee producers. Head to mapitforward.coffee/workshops or click the link in the description to purchase the on-demand version and start your journey towards a more sustainable coffee future today. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 1 of a brand new series on a topic that we've never covered before on the podcast, but is really, really, really important. Today, we are talking with Allison Ball from Food Biz Wiz and Retail Ready, and we are talking about grocery. And Alli, welcome to the podcast for the first time.
Thanks for having me, Lee. I'm so happy to be here.
First time of many, I hope.
Me too.
So in this series, we're going to talk about coffee and grocery. And this is really important and something I'm really curious about as somebody who works with clients in the coffee industry, but also as coffee and the consumer of coffee. So from an industry and a consumer perspective, undergoes rapid shifts and changes. I'm really keen to understand what role grocery could play in this. So I guess we're going to get this started by you telling people why all of us who care about grocery worship at your feet, and we listen to everything. We hang on to every word that you say on your Instagram, and everyone should follow it. But please tell us who you are, Alison.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for inviting me on. My name's Allison Ball. I am a former grocery buyer turned wholesale consultant and the creator of the Retail Ready program. So my world revolves around grocery. All things, how are we getting products on the shelf? How are we supporting brands in sales systems? How are we teaching brands how to sell off the shelf once they get there? So all day, every day, I'm heads down thinking about sales strategy in grocery. So Lee, I started in grocery, gosh, have I been doing this for 2 decades now? Maybe. But in the world of specialty grocery at Buy Right Market here in San Francisco, where I still live. And back then, Buy Right had one single location, and I manage the grocery category. So about 3,500 SKUs. And one of the categories that I managed was coffee. And this was back, 2008, 2009, 2010, when here in the Bay Area in the United States, third wave coffee was really cranking, like making moves in grocery, particularly in specialty grocery. And it was so eye-opening to me, Lee, how competitive it was back then, how our shoppers were interested in it, but we're still so confused, oh my goodness, $13 for a bag of coffee.
They're going to dream of the day it was 13. $2 a bag.
I know. And I just remember back then being like, it was when I started getting interested in coffee, being like, oh my goodness, like there's more to it than I think. There's so many options available. There's so much passion in the roasting community. And it was really, really fun for me to dive in. So fast forward to today. We help brands inside of our Retail Ready program. We've had over 3,000 brands go through that program, and we teach all about sales systems. So like I said, how to get on shelf, how to sell off the shelf, all different categories, including coffee. So really, really happy to be talking about coffee with you today.
As am I, and I want people to be very clear about something. Here comes the disclaimer again that everybody's sick of. Allison, is there any financial agreement between us, you coming on here?
None at all.
Have I asked you to sell anything while you're here? Am I buying anything off you? Am I a client of yours?
No, not at all.
Okay. Just so that you know, folks. It's really important to me that you guys know that we don't have guests on the podcast where we're getting anything out of them. There are a lot of people at the moment, a lot of podcasts in coffee that are paying guests to be on their podcast, asking for payment to be on their podcast. Yeah. This is not one of them at all. But having said that, there are ways that you can support the podcast. You can get on our Patreon. You can pay on YouTube. You can take one of our on-demand courses, or you can join a mastermind group or hire us to be consultants for your business. Our podcast is not where we make a single cent. So please remember that, other than from the advertising on YouTube. So now that we've gone through that long-winded disclaimer, okay, so let's start with the current reality of getting into coffee in grocery stores in the United States. And the reason we say the United States, that's where you specialize. And we want to be very clear that this is where it's specialized. So there may be some content in here that is relevant in other geographies, but where everything that we talk about is specific to the US market.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. And Lee, I really want the listeners to think about, what am I hearing today that I can extrapolate to, for my own business? What is that nugget of wisdom that, may be 90% relevant to me? How can I make a shift after listening to this conversation today? And yes, I'm based in the US. Like I said, San Francisco, home of really fantastic coffee. I feel very, very grateful for that. But yeah, US centric. The conversation is definitely US centric today.
Yeah. So let's start it at the place where most people get to when they start a business. They have like these visions of, well, I'm just going to launch a coffee roasting brand. I'm going to get an e-commerce store, and I'm going to get my coffee put into Ralph's, or I'm going to get it at Whole Foods. And tell me what is right and what's wrong about that thinking.
Yeah. All right, we'll just dive right in.
Yeah.
I think what's really challenging about that thinking is that it's not that easy, Lee, right? Everyone thinks, most entrepreneurs have passion, they have vision, they are confident in some areas, and they think they're really great roasters, right? Like, you wouldn't be starting a coffee business if you didn't think that your product was really great. And so we've got all these roasters thinking, I make a great product, I'm doing, thoughtful sourcing, I've got awesome packaging. Why wouldn't that grocery store want to carry me? And the challenge comes up where competition is really fierce, right? Grocery coffee sections are crowded with both legacy brands and newer specialty roasters. And wholesale buyers just aren't looking to switch up their coffee assortment that often. And so I think one of the challenges here is that brands are really optimistic about how easy it is, or that my product is really great. Why wouldn't that store want it?
Right.
Without realizing that if you've got that thinking, so does every other roaster in the neighborhood.
Right. So what is it? How does on the back end of in the grocery store, how does all of that work?
Okay. So first, I just want to take a step back and think about like grocery landscape as a whole.
Okay.
In the US, it's important to realize, and globally, there are different like stages or like intensities of grocery. So we can have a conversation here talking about specialty grocery, an independently owned market where, it might be a handful of markets, maybe a small chain of 10 to 20 stores. Or we can talk about like the big grocers, right? Whole Foods, Kroger's, Albertsons,
Ralph's.
Target, Walmart, right?
Yeah.
The big retailers. And it's important to recognize that there are similarities between independently owned and larger retailers, and there's differences too, right?
Mhm.
And so as brands are thinking about grocery, particularly coffee brands, most consider those smaller retailers first. It's just easier. And we can talk about why it's easier in a moment. But across the board here, if we're thinking about grocery, like how does it work as a whole? There is a buyer, a wholesale buyer who is working behind the scenes managing categories of the store. A category is simply like a lumping of like product. So coffee would be a category. Tea would be a separate coffee category, excuse me. Dairy, chocolate and confection, right? All of these are categories in the store. And that buyer's role, one of their responsibilities is to choose products for the shelves and make sure they sell profitably once that buyer puts them on the shelf. So, and one of the reasons, Lee, why I emphasize that this is only one of their responsibilities is because buyers have a whole bunch of things on their plate, and choosing new products is just one aspect of their role, right? So through this conversation, I'll come back to that a couple times, like really understanding how busy that buyer is. So So when we say buyer during the conversation, Lee, I'll be referencing the wholesale buyer. So when that wholesale buyer looks at their category, they're running their sales numbers either monthly, quarterly, annually. It kind of depends when they're doing their category reviews, but they're looking at sales numbers and they're determining what changes do I need to make to my category to increase profit margin, sales,
Revenue.
revenue. It's like basically financial, to make financial growth in this category. So that's one aspect. Yeah. So that buyer needs to assess their category, assess the needs of the category, and then find products that fill the holes in that category. So at that point, either they are going out and looking for products, trade shows, industry publications, social media at this point, magazines, right? Looking at industry publications and stuff. What is up and coming in this category? Or more likely, they have hundreds of
Samples.
pitches in their inbox, samples sitting in that sample box. We can talk about the sample box in a moment, but 100 of inbound pitches of roasters and products across categories trying to get their products on their shelves. So at that point, they're assessing the sales pitch. Is it convincing? And am I going to give this brand a shot? And so one of the things, and stores hate this when I say it, brands hate this when I say it, but at this point, buyer is making decisions based off whether or not they trust your product is going to help them meet their category goals, and not as much about the quality of your product itself.
That's going to be sobering for a lot of people to hear.
Yeah. And it is hard, right? Especially, I put myself in that roaster's shoes who is doing, everything they can to make the highest quality product that they can. But again, Lee, so are the other 100 roasters in your state. And so when that buyer's looking at a certain caliber of product anyways, like the nuance between product quality is like pretty slim. And I know roasters are going to push back on me and be like, no, Alli, like, but you don't know my beans. Like, you don't know our process. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And that buyer, that like middle-aged white dude at Walmart, like probably can't tell the difference.
Yeah,
Like when
exactly.
it's at a certain caliber. Yeah.
Well,
Okay, so
and
that buyer,
yep.
yeah,
No, no, no,
that
please
buyer
go ahead.
gets pitched,
Hmm.
right? They get all these sales pitches and they are making snap judgments about the brand. And ultimately they're like, okay, cool. We're gonna like go in these couple new brands. We're gonna swap out brands and see if we can get increased sales. Or lead, they might also do that category review and be like, you know what? Coffee category is good. I'm
We
happy
don't
with
need.
my sales.
Yep. We
I'm
don't need
meeting my
anything.
goals. We don't we don't need anything. We don't it's not worth my time to make any changes because we are already hitting our metrics here. So thanks, but no thanks, beautiful coffee roaster. I don't need you. So it can really feel like that wholesale buyer is the gatekeeper to your success because you got to convince them, right? And so
Hmm.
that's what we do in Retail Ready. We help brands understand how to make a sales pitch that is so convincing that that buyer has to give you a chance or wants to give you a chance. But yeah, so that's how grocery works. In general, it's that like wholesale buyer who is making decisions about the category, all in the attempt to increase the financial health of each category in their store.
And tell me, in grocery today, is anything particularly different than the way it used to be, let's say 5 years ago?
Yeah, there's a lot that's different in grocery today. One is it's just more competitive, right? I touched
Mm.
on this. There are more brands out there, without discrediting how hard it is to
Mm.
create a brand and launch a business. It's easier than ever. Or like there's so
Yeah, the
many
barrier to
people
entry.
doing it that the barrier to entry is lower. So
Mm.
more people, more brands in the marketplace. Then buyers have even more access to finding new products, right? Like we can go on something like Range Me. That's a B2B platform for connecting brands and buyers.
Okay.
You can go on Fair.
Yeah.
Lovely. Like, I love platforms like this. Um, you could do virtual trade shows without even leaving your desk as a
Yeah.
buyer. And so the quantity of available brands is just higher. So that's really important to know. And I don't say it to discourage your
Hmm.
listeners, but just, really to understand that there are more brands in the marketplace than there were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So that's changing. Two, another thing that's changing is there are just more financial
Drivers.
obligations
Yeah.
in grocery than I've ever seen before. Mm, And, I've got a whole theory on why, but it's hard to make money in grocery. Margins are super, super slim. And so stores have to find other ways to make money than just off the individual sale of products. So we're talking about paying for end caps, um,
Mm.
giving free fills. So literally one case of product per SKU per store when you're launching into big grocery, right? Like that can
Mm.
be $30,000 right there,
Yeah.
like out the gate, right?
Yeah.
Free product. Um, frequent promotions, quarterly promotions, so quarterly sales on the shelf. And this is just like thinking about the retail side. If we start talking about brokers and distributors, they want you to pay into programming with them. They want you to do quarterly promotions. And so more than ever, and particularly in big grocery, we see this more in the larger retailers.
Hmm.
Those independents aren't often asking you to pay for placements and end caps and things like that. There's much more understanding of smaller brands
Hmm.
in smaller grocery. But yeah, Lee, more than ever, we're seeing a pay to play model in
Yeah, that's what I
grocery. And
thought.
that is it's just really expensive, right? How do brands come up with that money, particularly if they're self-funded? And how do they manage the cash flow in their business if they are giving away so much free product or paying to play, tens of thousands of dollars on the shelf? So those are the two things that are shifting for the negative that are a little bit more challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll say one of the positive things that I'm seeing in grocery is there is more and more focus on ensuring that there's diversity in the categories. So not all retailers do this. And, certainly recently we've even seen some rollbacks on this
Mm-hmm.
in grocery. But are we supporting women-owned businesses? Are we supporting BIPOC founded businesses?
Mm-hmm.
Are we supporting organic or regenerative or, whatever that is, making sure that there is
Something for every
more
consumer.
yeah, exactly. And like, are we not just going with the same big legacy brands because we've always done that? The consumers are asking for different things on the shelf. So that's a positive, right? And for the listeners who are like, "Oh yeah, like, I'm a black owned roaster.
Business, yeah.
I'm a female founded business." Like, that's great news for you. Use
Mm.
that to your advantage in your sales pitches, in those conversations. Buyers are looking for that.
I think this is a really great foundation for our whole conversation. I'm very excited. In the next episode, folks, we're going to talk about the mistakes people are making when they're trying to get into grocery. So join us for the next episode. This is fantastic, Alli. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. I really hope you enjoyed this episode, friends. Please don't forget to show us some love by subscribing, liking, commenting, and most of all, sharing this podcast with your friends. Check the show notes for links, including our sponsors and our Patreon. And stay tuned for more great conversations on the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward.